It was always going to be tough for the Sacramento Kings to build upon their historic Friday night in Los Angeles. But I'm telling you, tonight was the biggest night of this playoff race so far, and I'll explain why right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. Today, presented by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10. So let's get right into it. Why was tonight bigger for the Sacramento Kings playoff race in the Western Conference than their win against the Los Angeles Clippers on Friday night, when the Clippers are at the time and were at the time in fourth place, just behind the Sacramento Kings? I think they were a game and a half behind the Kings at that point. Had the Kings lost that game, they would have only been half a game up. Well, thanks to some help from some other teams, which we'll get into, and the Sacramento Kings handling their business like they did tonight against the Oklahoma City Thunder, 124-115. The Kings are in a fantastic position. The best start to this playoff race, and I'm talking about from the All-Star break onward, the best start out of any team in the Western Conference. And I would say out of any team in the NBA, with the exception of the Milwaukee Bucks, who continue to win without Giannis Antetokounmpo. And we have some thanks to share and some gratitude to give to the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll get to that in a little bit. But check this out. Your Sacramento Kings are 35-25 on the season now. 10 games over 500. The last time they were 10 games over 500 was 2005. I was 11 years old the last time the Sacramento Kings had a record of 10 or more games over 500. Again, if you need another example on the long list of examples as to why this team is different, and this team is more similar to the glory years of the late 90s and early 2000s than they've been in the gutter for the last 16 years. Just add that to the list for you. But look, when it comes to this playoff race, right, the Kings cannot do better than what they're doing. They're off to a 3-0 start since the All-Star break. 2 of those wins on the road, all 3 against Western Conference teams. They beat 2 teams that they absolutely should beat, who are well below them in the standings in the West. 2 teams below 500, the Portland Trailblazers and Oklahoma City Thunder. The Kings have beaten them. And then, of course, what they did on Friday night against a championship caliber Clippers team who was trying to catch them in the standings. And because the Kings have gone 3-0 since the All-Star break, and thanks to the help of a couple of the teams, the Kings are now 3 games ahead of both the Phoenix Suns and Los Angeles Clippers in the 3rd spot. So the Suns and Clippers are in 4th and 5th. I think technically the Suns have the 4th spot because of tiebreakers or whatever it is. But they're jumping back and forth. Their win percentage is nearly identical, or they're in that same spot. The Kings now have a 3-game lead over the 2 of those teams. 3 games, not insurmountable by any means. Of course, not a massive, massive gap. But with the amount of games still to be played between those contenders beneath the Kings who are trying to catch up to the Kings, even a half a game can make all of the difference. And here's the most important part here. If we're going to look at that 3-game gap and say, ooh, that's still not as wide or as comfortable as I need it to be to feel good as a Sacramento Kings fan, to feel good about the Kings securing that 3rd spot. If that's you, I understand. But think about this. That gap is twice as big as the gap between the Kings in 3rd and the Memphis Grizzlies in 2nd. So mathematically, the Sacramento Kings have a better chance of catching, or are closer to catching, the Memphis Grizzlies and moving up to 2 than they are falling to 4 or 5 with the 2 teams below them. Now, of course, the Phoenix Suns, we figure, are going to be better once they get Kevin Durant back. The Los Angeles Clippers are a good team, took the Kings to the wire and put up 175 points in double overtime on the Kings. So we know there's still plenty of firepower left in the Western Conference to catch the Kings. But at this point in time, the Kings are rolling when they need to. Getting started right away, playing with the sense of urgency that we've been asking for and that I talked a lot about during the All-Star break. They're showing that right away. And what I loved is the fact that they came out in this game against the Oklahoma City Thunder and put the pedal to the metal right away. They scored 29 points in less than 8 minutes in this game. Like, they came out right away and said, we know we had a phenomenal win over Los Angeles. We know there's probably nothing really we can do that will top that game, and it's hard to follow up that game and live up to that game, but what we can still do is we can win and we can handle our business on the road against a team that we're supposed to beat. Now, credit to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that's still a solid team. I think they're better than their record indicates, and they're only a few games under 500. That's a team that's on the rise. I expect them to be good next year or the year after, and they battled back, and they didn't allow the Kings to create too much separation for the majority of this game. I think the Kings went up by 15 points or something like that. That was their largest lead. But the Oklahoma City Thunder made the Kings work, but the Kings still worked. They handled their business, and they started with a sense of urgency that we didn't see in their win coming out of All-Star break at home against the Portland Trail Blazers. The Sacramento Kings continue to be a really, really good team on the road, and they are the only top 8 team in the Western Conference who has yet to lose since the All-Star break. There are only 3 teams in the West, period, that have not lost since the All-Star break. That's the Sacramento Kings, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Utah Jazz. Well, the Utah Jazz and Los Angeles Lakers, while being in the hunt for a playoff spot, more really a play-in spot, the Kings aren't too worried about them at this point in time. The gap between them and the Kings, of course, is insurmountable, but I feel pretty confident at this point saying that the Kings are in another tier to those 2 teams. They're handling their business. The Lakers are trying to get hot at the right time. And actually, as much as it pains for me to say, we got to give some thanks. We got to give some props to the Los Angeles Lakers. It feels gross. Get it off my tongue. I know. I'm going to get it out of the way so I don't have to say it anymore. But thank you, Los Angeles Lakers. Sorry, it's just really hard for me to say. Thank you, Los Angeles Lakers, for coming back from 27 down, I believe. They were down 27 on the road against the Dallas Mavericks, came back and beat the Dallas Mavericks, moving the Mavericks further down the standings. And then, of course, thank you to the Milwaukee Bucks. I have no problem saying that. I'm a big fan of the Bucks and the Bucks organization. Thank you to the Milwaukee Bucks for handling their business against the Phoenix Suns. Now, both these games went final before the Sacramento Kings played. So we knew going into this game, and the Kings knew going into this game, that if they were to handle business, if they were to win, they would create more separation against 2 teams that are biting at their heels in this Western Conference race. Again, the Kings handle their business. This is a massive night. This is a massive night for the Kings. It's a bigger night than Friday night because not only did they handle their business and win a game that they're supposed to win, but they took advantage of help given to them by other opposing teams, because the Dallas Mavericks have one of the easier schedules out of all these teams in the playoff race. So they might not lose too much. And for the fact that they lost, they blew that big lead and lost to the Lakers, that is an opportunity that good teams do not pass up in a playoff race. The Sacramento Kings took advantage of that by handling their own business. And then, of course, the Phoenix Suns, we expect them to win a lot. The Kings and the Suns have 2 meetings against each other coming up before the season wraps up. And in both those meetings, I think Kevin Durant is expected to play. Who knows how those games are going to go, but this helps you build an even bigger safety net going into those games because they lost and the Kings won. So a massive night for the Sacramento Kings when it comes to the race. Maybe a little underwhelming of a game compared to Friday, and that might be the rest of the season. I don't know if a game outside of the Kings' first game in the playoffs can live up to what they did on Friday night. But regardless of that, in terms of this playoff race and the whole standings watch and the 1,000 feet up view of the Western Conference standings, this was a major, major night for the Sacramento Kings. Now, something that I wanted to touch on, and I mentioned this on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. If you have any feedback, if you're watching on YouTube, get loose in the comment section down below. The response and the reaction to Friday night's episode of Locked On Kings, really it was Saturday mornings because I didn't drop it till like 1 a.m. and didn't go to sleep till 3 a.m. after that game. But the reaction was so amazing, and I thank you so, so much. One of my most watched and listened to podcasts ever. I was a little over the top, feeling myself, having a really, really good time, as I know a lot of you were. You seemed to like that, so I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun recording that podcast, and hopefully we're recording more fun, energetic, exciting podcasts like that over this playoff race and into the playoffs. You best believe when the Sacramento Kings clinch, oh boy, there better be like foam on the walls or something, because I'm probably going to break something. But thank you for your support on that podcast. You can reach out and engage with me in Kings talk or basketball talk or sports talk in general at any time. I highly encourage that. But after the trade deadline, I engaged with a lot of Kings fans who were not feeling great about where the Sacramento Kings were really upset that the Kings did not make any moves at the trade deadline. And this isn't about being right or being wrong. In fact, I tweeted this out. To me, any Kings fan who cares more about being right, anybody in this conversation, period, who cares more about being right than they do about the Kings actually winning and enjoying the success that we haven't seen for a long time, they're not worth talking to. And that includes me. I hold myself to that same standard. So if you are a Kings fan that agreed with me and agreed and felt still pretty good about this team, and we're not too happy with what some of the naysayers were saying and the non-believers were saying, there's no need for an I told you so. There's not. Just like if the Sacramento Kings, I should say when the Sacramento Kings lose a game or two, an important game or two during this race, I hope those people on social media don't come crawling out of wherever they are currently, because I haven't heard them for the last couple of games. I have not heard anything from them. I hope they don't come out and say, see, the Kings suck, only after a Kings loss. My point is, stay in the moment and enjoy it together, because this is what the Sacramento Kings are doing. They're in a position we never thought that they would be in. This is an incredibly fun run, and we should just all be enjoying this together, regardless of how we think the Sacramento Kings got here or what we think the Sacramento Kings should or should not have done. That doesn't matter. It's all about enjoying it. And how about we enjoy Keegan Murray? So I'm not going to say I told you so about the Sacramento Kings not doing something or not doing anything at the trade deadline or being a team that's still good enough to secure the third seed. I'm not going to say anything I told you so with that, because they still have a long way to go. I will, though, take a little bit of a victory lap when it comes to Keegan Murray. And those of you who have listened to Locked On Kings since this offseason know how big I was on Keegan. And I've shared this story before, and I'll share it again. I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but I was one of a very small amount of Sacramento Kings media members that was inside the Golden One Center on draft day that was very happy with what the Sacramento Kings did. A lot of them weren't happy, as I know a lot of Sacramento Kings fans, vocal Kings fans on social media, weren't happy. Whether you weren't happy with the Keegan Murray pick, you weren't happy they didn't trade the pick and get more assets, weren't happy that they didn't take Jaden Ivey, whatever it was. So time will tell. All I'm saying is that Keegan Murray, and I know I've hit this point home a million times on the Locked On Kings podcast over the last handful of months and over the course of the season, Keegan Murray is the absolute right pick for the Sacramento Kings team. He continues to prove it time and time again. He continues to win people over. He shows his development, how quickly he can develop, how he can take notes and take challenges from Mike Brown and the coaching staff, and within a couple of games incorporate it consistently into what he's able to do. Keegan Murray has been fantastic for the Sacramento Kings, and he was so tonight. 20 points, 7 of 15 shooting from the field, 4 of 9 from three-point range, 6 rebounds, a couple of assists, and 3 steals. That's a career-high 3 steals for Keegan Murray in this game. Keegan has been attacking the basket a lot more aggressively over the course of the season. You can watch from the beginning of the season to how he was kind of timid going near the rim and putting the ball on the floor, to where he was tonight, attacking the basket, finishing through contact and ones, dunking. Had a couple of big dunks on Friday night in Los Angeles against the Clippers too. Like, because of the big games that Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox had, I did not give Keegan Murray the recognition that he deserved for how well he played against the Los Angeles Clippers. And shame on me for doing that, because he, as a rookie starting on a team that is third in the Western Conference, a team that is going to end up, in my opinion, being a top team in the West, turning that around from being a team that was a perennial laughingstock and loser that was struggling to even get into the play-in. Like, that turnaround is massive, and Keegan Murray has been a consistent part of that as a rookie. So my victory lap is this. It's not so much that I got the Keegan Murray pick right, because I'm not a general manager, and it's a damn good thing I'm not a general manager, because I'd make a whole hell of a lot more mistakes than Vlade Divac and Pete D'Alessandro and all the worst GMs in history combined would make, right? And it's a lot harder to do it in real life than it is to do it on NBA 2K. And even on NBA 2K, I suck putting together a franchise sometimes. My victory lap is this. Flash and flare is not the best thing. It's sometimes the most enticing thing. We saw the clips of what Jaden Ivey was able to do, throwing down his dunks, the athleticism, and you compare that to Keegan Murray's fundamentals and three-point shooting and sometimes post offense. One was more exciting than the other, and more people got attached to the excitement and the proverbial ceiling that they attached to that excitement than they got attached to fundamentals. If you bring solid fundamentals into the NBA with you right away, as a rookie, you already have that solid those solid fundamentals down. You still have to learn the NBA game, but you don't have to learn the game of basketball. You're in an immediate position to succeed no matter how much athleticism or flash or flair that you lack. Now, I'm not saying Jaden Ivey doesn't have solid basketball fundamentals. What I'm saying is Keegan Murray was not only the right pick for the Sacramento Kings, he's the right pick at 4. He was the absolute right pick at 4. He was the best guy there. And a lot of people projected Jaden Ivey to have a bigger, higher ceiling than Keegan Murray, and you're wrong. You're wrong. Because Keegan Murray's ceiling is way higher than even he's gotten to right now, but if this is what Keegan Murray was for his entire career, he would be an excellent selection for the Sacramento Kings. In fact, I firmly believe that when 15, 20 years from now, we will talk about the Keegan Murray draft selection in 2022 the same way we talk about the Peja Stojakovic draft selection in, what was that, 1996 or 97? Whenever it was, 98, something around there. We're going to talk about Keegan Murray's draft selection the same way we talk about Peja Stojakovic. And yes, that might result in number 13. If Keegan Murray spends his entire career in Sacramento, I think that will result in number 13 being hanging from the rafters. It's a bold thing to say, with him just being a rookie and him not even being the most important player on the Sacramento Kings team. But I'm telling you, Keegan Murray was not only the right pick for this team, he was the right pick for this organization. And if Monte McNair is able to keep him in Sacramento for his entire career like they say they want to and say they wanted to on draft night, then I think he's going to go down as a phenomenal King and one of the best Kings draft pick selections in history. But all that is tomorrow. We're focused on today. And today, Keegan Murray is helping this team win and helping this team make the playoffs, and that's what's most important. I still have to talk about De'Aaron Fox. How the hell have I not talked about De'Aaron Fox and the run that he's on yet? I have to talk about that. I want to talk about the Kings' depth, because that's been a major conversation since and around the trade deadline. Plus, today was a very special day for a friend and colleague of mine. And I want to talk about that in a little bit as well. Like I said at the beginning of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Now, Prize Picks is the #1 way to play daily fantasy sports, but in my opinion, especially daily fantasy NBA. The way it works, you pick 2 to 6 players and whether they're going to score over or under their Prize Pick scoring projections. So maybe De'Aaron Fox tonight was like 24.5. Well, if you took the over, you won. You do that for 2 to 6 players, you're going to make up to 25 times your money. And they have projections not just for the top guys in the league that everybody knows, but you can really use your team knowledge to the test and maybe get the line for Trey Lyles or Malik Monk or some of those important role players or Keegan Murray, those pieces that you know are capable of going off and hitting that over every once in a while. Use that Kings knowledge and make some money on Prize Picks. They don't just offer projections, of course, for the NBA. They also have it for the NFL, for the MLB, college sports, including women's and men's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, combat sports like MMA and boxing, and more. They have it all for you. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the Prize Picks projections. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, and it's currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. So give Prize Picks a try right now. If you're signing up for the first time, use promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit up to $100, you'll get 100% of a instant match. So you deposit $100, you get $100. You deposit $50, you deposit $25, you get $50, you get $25. Free money for you to make money on Prize Picks. Some people have a hard time with me saying De'Aaron Fox is a superstar. I get it. He finally just now got the recognition that he deserves as an all-star. And still, it took an injury replacement to get him there where he belonged. Now, as important as all-star selections are and that recognition is, I still lean heavily on what De'Aaron Fox is going to do when the lights are brightest and the stage is as big as the playoffs. His best, in my opinion, is still yet to come. But right now, he's playing under the brightest lights and on the biggest stage that he's ever played in his career. And look what he is doing tonight. 33 points, 11 of 19 shooting from the field, 8 assists, and 2 steals. De'Aaron Fox has scored 30 or more points in 7 straight games. And he scored 30 or more points in 9 of the last 10 games. The one game otherwise was his 16-point performance, and I think that was his first game back from paternity leave or after his son was born in Houston, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, 9 of the last 10 games, De'Aaron Fox has scored 30 or more points, including the last 7 straight. This man is on a different level. This man is playing like an absolute superstar, leading his team to the playoffs. When it matters most, and I've told you this, and I've felt this for a long time, as soon as De'Aaron Fox got that platform, got that opportunity to play in games that matter a lot more than any of the games that he's played so far to this point, he was going to insert himself. He was going to force himself in the conversation with the exciting guards in this league. He is doing that. He cannot be ignored. And it's not just the fact that he's scoring a boatload of points, because when you're a superstar, sometimes you can take 30, 40 shots and get your points that way. De'Aaron Fox has been extremely efficient during this stretch. So in the 9 out of the last 10 games that he scored 30 or more points, De'Aaron is shooting 56% from the field in those 9 games. 110 of 195. That efficiency is bonkers for someone with the usage rate and the amount of shots that he's putting up and the amount that's on his shoulders during this stretch. His worst field goal shooting night in that stretch was 47.8%. That was his worst game shooting from the field during this stretch. He's scoring a boatload of points. He's making a boatload of shots. He's unstoppable at this point in time. Absolutely playing like a superstar. If you're not ready to anoint him that, if you need him to win playoff series or win a championship to get to that status, that's fine. What I'm telling you is, if you look at what a superstar does for a team, De'Aaron Fox is doing that for the Sacramento Kings right now, and that deserves recognition. Here's some recognition for you, and I'm taking this from the Kings TV broadcast, and I wonder if these numbers are still the same now. But coming into tonight's game, over the 6 straight 30-point scoring nights he had scored, during that stretch, De'Aaron has been, or was, first in points scored, total points scored, first in overall field goal percentage, first in points in the paint, which is wild that a 6'2" point guard leads the league over 6 games in points in the paint. That includes bigs. That includes players that camp inside. De'Aaron Fox leads them all during this stretch. First in points off of turnovers, and a lot of those turnovers he's creating on the defensive end of the floor. And finally, as expected, and as he's been all season, first in clutch points. De'Aaron is doing what no other player is doing in the league right now during this stretch. And I imagine all these numbers hold true for the 7 straight games that he scored 30 or more points. De'Aaron, there's not a player in the NBA that is playing better than De'Aaron Fox right now. That's a fact. Those numbers prove it. Let's talk about the Kings' depth a little bit, because, of course, as good as De'Aaron Fox is, as good as Domantas Sabonis is, he had another really good night, as good as Keegan Murray is, this Kings team as a whole needs to be good for them to survive this playoff race and have success in the playoffs. Depth was a major talking point around the trade deadline, right? This Kings team, do they have enough depth? Do they not have enough depth? Weirdly enough, you can look at depth and break down the depth of a team in different ways. Here's an area that I put a lot of weight into that I don't think a lot of people take into account. When a lot of people think of depth, they look at minutes, right? And minutes distribution. They look at holes in a roster and they say, okay, you have Domantas Sabonis, an incredible center in the NBA. And then when Domantas Sabonis goes out of the game, the Kings have Chimezie Metu or Rashawn Holmes or maybe Trey Lyles. Like, okay, clear drop-off. That's a concern. That's a hole that you would like to address. Or backup point guard, right? Oh, as good as Davion Mitchell is defensively, offensively he hasn't been good. Like, that is depth, that is rotational depth, and that is extremely important for the Sacramento Kings. I'm not diminishing that. But this is the depth that the Sacramento Kings have, and this is a depth that is extremely valuable and something that I think we take for granted because it happens sporadically. Minutes are consistent. Rotational spots are consistent. Those are questions that we ask and numbers that we see every single night. But the kind of depth that I've noticed with this Kings team that I think is really important is the amount of players on this roster who are and have been capable of stepping up and delivering big games when the Kings needed them to. As great of a tear as De'Aaron Fox is on, right? And Domantas Sabonis has 7 triple-doubles this season. Like, he's playing he's just playing out of his mind. Second only to Nikola Jokic, right? Like, those two, we know how important they are. Plus, some of the starters, we know how important they are. But look at the amount of players on this roster that have absolutely exploded at one point or another to help the Sacramento Kings win games. Of course, Fox, Sabonis. Harrison Barnes had an amazing stretch in January. Keegan Murray's had some massive games, including tonight. Terrence Davis off the bench had that massive performance against the Brooklyn Nets on national television. Speaking of national television, side note, by the way, since we last recorded the podcast, thank God the NBA did something right and they flexed the Kings and New York Knicks in March in Sacramento to TNT. Thank you, NBA. All it took was the second highest scoring game in NBA history for you to finally recognize that the Kings were a team that maybe people outside of Sacramento and whoever they're playing want to watch. Congratulations, NBA. Good for you. I'm glad you finally caught up and are with the program. Hopefully the Kings do the same thing to the New York Knicks that they did to the Brooklyn Nets in Sacramento on national TV, and maybe we'll get another TV game on top of that. But I digress. All right, coming back to my overall point about the Kings' depth. Terrence Davis has had big nights. He had a big night the other night, right? Different guys have stepped up at different times. Kevin Huerter has had major nights for the Kings. He's been struggling a little bit as of late, but of course he started the season shooting over 50% from three-point range. How important that was at the time that, like, Harrison Barnes was struggling a little bit at that point. And then Trey Lyles tonight, and Trey Lyles really consistently over the course of the season. I think Lyles has had a 30-point performance, right? If I'm not mistaken, he was around. He had an explosive home game, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, Trey Lyles has been really, really solid off the bench for the Sacramento Kings. And tonight, that was no different. Trey Lyles tonight, 16 points, 5 of 8 from the field, 3 of 5 from three-point range, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. Remember, Trey Lyles was kind of a sneaky part acquisition of the Marvin Bagley trade. Also in that trade, the Kings got Dante DiVincenzo, but he's gone, so we'll not focus on that. If the trade straight up was Marvin Bagley for Trey Lyles, the Kings beyond have won that trade. And the Kings got even more than that in that deal. Monte McNair's a wizard. That's all I can say. Feather in your cap, gold star on your resume. You could talk about the Tyrese Halliburton pick. You could talk about the Keegan Murray pick. You could talk about turning this team around. You could talk about the Domantas Sabonis trade. Add Trey Lyles to that list, in my opinion. The Kings' depth, rotationally, there are holes. There are absolutely concerns. And there are players that I know for a fact that are on this roster that think they should be doing more than what they're actually doing. Now, that's more of a Mike Brown thing than that is a Monte McNair front office thing. Regardless, this team is playing extremely well because there are so many guys on this roster that have stayed ready and can step up and deliver and help the Sacramento Kings win on nights when it's needed most. That's depth, and that's extremely important for this team going forward. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but want to try and avoid all the fat and all the calories that typically comes with those treats that satisfy that sweet tooth, Built Bars are perfect for you. Look, now that we're closing in on March, right, a lot of us have our New Year's resolutions still going strong, trying to eat right or lose weight or maybe put on some more weight and eat better and get some more protein in the diet. Built Bars help with all of that and allow you to still satisfy that sweet tooth that we all have and we don't want to get rid of no matter how hard we try, right? Built Bars are covered in 100% chocolate, soft, easy to chew, delicious, so many different flavors. My favorite is mint brownie, but you could try their churro flavor. You could try their brownie chunk flavor, their peanut butter flavor. Like, they have so many amazing flavors for you to try. Again, all covered in 100% chocolate, but they're only 130 calories and up to 17 grams of protein on average in these bars. Not to mention, they have the Built granola bars for you to try if you need a little extra energy and another snack. Or if you really are into some sweets, you could try their marshmallow puffs, which are their protein-infused marshmallows. Yeah, those are a real thing. Give those a try. No longer do you have to order them off of Built.com and wait for them to be shipped to you. You can go now to your local Walmart or Sam's Club, go to the pharmacy section, give yourself a try of those boxes. Pick out one of those boxes. They come in small sizes, so you can test out a couple flavors. And you can always go on Built.com, find the flavors that you want, and order your own custom box there. Whatever you try, I think you're going to like Built. Tonight was not only a major night for the Sacramento Kings in the Western Conference playoff race. Tonight was a major night for the Sacramento Kings because of their legendary broadcaster, Gary Gerould. 3,000 games that Gary Gerould has broadcast here in Sacramento. He's been broadcasting Kings games since the very beginning here in Sacktown, on the TV side, but mostly on the radio side. I just wanted to say, Gary is a hero of mine. G-Man is someone that I have always looked up to, that I idolized, that I grew up listening to. So many nights and so many days in the car listening to G-Man call games, and to this day, I will still take every opportunity I have to drive when there is a Kings game on so that I could hear G-Man call games. He is an icon. He's an incredible storyteller. And speaking of stories, I want to share one real quick. G and I have had a lot of really, really cool interactions, at least cool on my end. Hopefully they're memorable for him. I had the opportunity to work and engineer when I was working at Sacktown Sports 1140, which is the flagship radio station of the Kings. I had an opportunity to work directly with G, engineering the games from back at the studio and board opping the games and communicating with him that way, which was a real treat for me. And getting to hear him do what he does and see the behind the scenes and hear the behind the scenes of the work that he does. But when I was really, really early on, I think I was just out of my internship at the time with KH2K, still in college. I was a senior, and my senior project was about the art of storytelling through sports broadcasting. And at the time, the Kings were still playing in Sleep Train Arena, Arco Arena, and I asked G-Man if he would sit down with me and do an interview with me for this project. And I would just ask him questions about storytelling and about what he does. And he was so gracious with his time, spent like 10, 15 minutes with me before the game started, and just like he poured his wisdom and poured his passion into a college student. Didn't have to do that. For someone as big time as he is, someone who as good as he is, doing it as long as he does, didn't have to do that, but he did that. And he helped me not only deliver a successful project and graduate, he's helped me so many times, whether he knows it or not, throughout my career to this point. And I'm very fortunate to be able to interact with him on a semi-regular basis, and sometimes with the Kings schedule, daily basis. And I'm very, very thankful for that. So G-Man is an absolute icon. G-Man is a legend. Go and check out the great tribute video that the Sacramento Kings put together for him. 3,000 games that G has called, and I can't wait for him to be able to call actual playoff games again here in Sacramento. It's coming, G. You've earned it. No one deserves it more than you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you so much for all you've done for me, and thank you so much for all you've done for Sacramento Kings basketball. The G-Man's voice, Gary Gerould's voice, is synonymous not just with Kings basketball, but synonymous with basketball, period, for so many of us here in Sacramento. And I just appreciate him so much, and so glad that he made it to that number, that milestone, and I'm looking forward to the milestones to come. Thank you so much for your support here of the Locked On Kings podcast. As always, on tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to be joined by Jason Ross, the original host here of Locked On Kings a long time ago. I nearly took over from Jason Ross nearly 6 years ago now, hosting Locked On Kings, but he started it, and he's been a friend of mine for a long time. Of course, has worked with the Gary Gerould for a long time, so I'm sure Jay Ross and I will talk about G, amongst many other things, the fun of this playoff race. So I hope you will join me for that. Kings play the Thunder again on Tuesday. Have another guest, Damian Barling from ESPN 1320's D-Lo and KC is scheduled to join me on Wednesday. So you've got like 3 straight podcasts over 3 straight days coming, and I hope you will join me for all of them. Cannot wait to have you with me for the next episode tomorrow. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.